CPU. Now this specific CPU is going to be slightly different because it has had pin damage in the past and had to be repaired. So as you can see though, it has pins on the CPU as opposed to on the motherboard. And what you do is you take the CPU, and on the top it has a little arrow on one of the corners, and that arrow matches an arrow on the socket itself. And then you just set it over the pins. Now with this one, because the bent pins, previously bent pins that have been straightened out, it has to be jiggled just a little bit, but it slides right in. And on a newer CPU that's never had bent pins, it should just actually slide in for the most part. If you have to, maybe just tap just a little tiny lightly, and then you just lower the lever, and voila, that is the CPU installation for a Ryzen CPU. Now, as a part of this, I also consider the CPU cooler or heatsink to be a part of the CPU installation. So now, on the Ryzen ones, unless you have an aftermarket cooler, which may use these here brackets, the standard stock coolers that come with the Ryzen 3 is the Stealth model. It's short, about an inch or so thick, and it has the fan on top. The Ryzen 5s generally have a Wraith Spire, which is about 1.5 inches to 2 inches thick, so it dissipates more heat quicker. And then the Ryzen 7s generally have the RGB fans, and so do the Ryzen 9s from the 3000 series. The 5000 series, I've heard reports that some come with coolers, some don't, so depends on which one you get. You may or may not have a cooler at all. I haven't been able to pick up a Ryzen 9 from the 5000 series or any of the Ryzen 5000 series CPUs because they've all been out of stock. When I'm able to, I do hope to get a Ryzen 9 5900X to replace my 3900X because I do have an X570 motherboard in my editing rig. So now this cooler here is just the stock cooler. Now it has been used in the past, and so to test everything to make sure the CPU worked. There is no thermal paste on it because I have used it before. So now for that we will need a tube of thermal paste. And for the thermal paste, we simply need to put about a pea-sized dot right there. Tap that a little bit to get the excess off the tip of this. And so you don't want a lot. I know that some people have seen videos making fun of the Verge video. I'm not going to make fun of it in this video, but I do want to point out that you do not need as much thermal paste as they put on that machine. And you only need it if your CPU cooler does not have thermal paste on it. If it's a brand new CPU with the cooler will have the thermal paste pre-applied, ready to go. All you do is do the next steps. Okay, you do not need any additional thermal paste. However, if you want to slightly improve performance, and we're talking about maybe a couple degrees of temperature, a couple degrees Celsius, you can purchase really good thermal paste. I use this, which is an Arctic Alumina, which is made by Arctic Silver. It is a ceramic type of thermal paste that is non-conductive, and so it works really well on a wide variety of both the CPUs as well as GPUs. With this particular setup, we do need to apply it, like I said, because the cooler has been used. However, if it's a new cooler, we don't. Like the Verge had a new cooler and applied thermal paste, which is a no-no. So, and I am using my Oriya, I believe that's how it's pronounced, electric screwdriver to do this because my hands, like I've said in the past, my mobility is not 100%, so I use this as my method of installing and uninstalling hardware that has screws. And so we just take off those two brackets. The back plate is still underneath, and so the back plate comes off if you lift it up, and it's got 4 posts that go into the 4 holes that are in a rectangular shape. Now, when you install it, you want it on a solid or mostly solid surface so that the plate is held in place. If you go to do this inside of the case after putting the motherboard into the case, it becomes a lot more difficult. So I do highly recommend that you do this before installing it into a case. Now, I'm going to also show a bonus at the end here, but we're nearing the finish line. So for this, after we put the thermal paste on, we just match the posts up, put it down over top so that all 4 posts are lined up. And then there are 4 screws that go into those post holes, so we just it looks like my screwdriver may be dying, so I might have to manually turn. Means it's going to take a little bit longer. And I do it in a crisscross alternating method. I do not do 2 of one side. I do diagonals and then I move to one side and do diagonals again. You want to do it this way so that the pressure is applied evenly over it. And the springs on these stock coolers, they ting most of the time when you're done, so you don't have to worry about over tightening. There we go. Now being used, this one, you can hear a little bit of the tinging as it goes. There it is, it's locked in place. And then you can pick it up by the cooler and that will show that there's no movement of the cooler, and that means that it is firmly in place. And then the last step is that you simply plug in the cooler. Now you can leave it the way it is and just plug it in. However, what I generally do is I wrap and loop it so that you get a little bit of a, not a knot because you don't want it tight, but it keeps it from being super long and loose. And then you just plug that in. And now when you go to cable manage, it'll be a little bit nicer, a little bit easier, and you won't have a cable that's like flopped way out and making a mess. Now, also, what you can also do, I'm going to grab a different screwdriver because for this I do need a small tip. Okay, so I will have cut that bit out. This screwdriver set I got from Walmart for about 10 bucks. You don't need super expensive tools. The Orion one was roughly $30 to $40. For an electric pen style, that's actually not that high. And then this screwdriver is from the Hyper Tough or whatever brand it is from Walmart. You can get it in their section, it's like 10 bucks. Now, there are 4 small, tiny screws on this fan. And what I'm going to show you in this little bonus here is that you undo these screws. And then you just rotate the shroud of the fan 45 degrees, 90 degrees, and then just screw these back in. And the reason that I'm bringing this part up is that when you put this into a computer case, we no longer lay them down like they used to be way back in like the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, where they laid flat on the desk, hence the term desktop. Now they sit at a 90-degree angle, and when you look in through the glass panel, you want it to be AMD, not AMD, on the side where it's not really readable. And so that is the complete installation of a Ryzen CPU. Now for an Intel-based one, it is exactly the same with the pins and sockets being reversed. You would open a little lever, which pops up a little retention item. You put the CPU down, matching it with these little notches on the sides. And then once the notches are lined up, you set it down gently, no pressure. Then you close the latch and the lever, and then you put on the thermal paste and the CPU cooler, or the CPU cooler with pre-applied thermal paste if it is a new cooler. And there are some few coolers that are new, especially AIOs, that do not come with it pre-applied, but they'll give you a little tube or packet inside the package. And so that is the installation process of a CPU, especially the Ryzen CPUs. So I hope that you all enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure you hit the like button down below. And if you haven't already, make sure you hit the subscribe button right here, and that way you can keep up to date on not only the new videos, but also the community section that we have, so that we can communicate back and forth. And I will post regularly or semi-regularly or sporadically depending on the month of the year. I know that's kind of bad, and I apologize. I do try and keep at least every couple weeks I try to make some post, but I have fallen behind on that some. And if you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comments section down below. Feel free to ask questions about myself, the channel, or the products, or even the process in this video. So thank you for watching, everyone. Hope you all have a great day. Bye for now.